I'm Robin Miller-Brecker.
And I'm Karen Lenzer. Welcome to Seeking Center, the podcast.
Join us each week as we have the conversations and weed through the spiritual and holistic clutter for you. We'll boil it down to what you need to know now.
We're all about total wellness, which to us means building a healthy life on a physical, mental, and spiritual level. We'll talk to the trailblazers who will introduce you to the practices, products, and experiences that may be just what you need to hear about to transform your life.
If you're listening to this, it's no accident. Think of this as your seeking center and your place to seek your center. And for even more mega inspo, sign up for Seeking Center, the newsletter at seekingcenter.app. As Karen and I continue our seeking journey with the intention to share the extraordinary people and practices that are transforming lives around the world, it never ceases to amaze us how many special souls exist and have been called to help all of us live to our fullest potential. Meet Erin Doppelt. She brings together Eastern ritual with Western psychology, which we can't wait to talk all about. Erin is a spiritual psychology teacher, meditation expert, business coach, writer, podcast host, and is the CEO and founder of Spiritual Intelligence, which hosts certification trainings and business and spiritual courses to support those who desire to live their most joyful and soul authentic life. Erin left her corporate job and spent most of her 20s living in Israel, India, Italy, and throughout Asia, where she lived off the land, deepened her relationship with her spirituality, and even became a functional medicine nutritionist and yoga teacher. She is a manifestation magnet and an activator. She believes that the world is a better place when more people are living as their true aligned selves. Erin has so much to share. She is dynamic and has walked the walk. She lives to activate what is within you. Let's get talking. Hi, Erin.
That was such a beautiful intro. Thank you so much for having me.
You have walked the walk.
Yeah, I did the work.
And in your young life have really covered so much ground. So we're really excited to be able to share your story because you have activated in your own life and manifested this incredible life that you're living right now. So maybe that's the best place for us to start.
I believe we have an idea of who we desire to be when we're really younger, and then we forget over time. So I was always very clear that I was a spiritual child and that I wanted to live this life where I was traveling and having nourishing conversations and eating exquisite food all around the world. Yet I didn't know the aligned action that needed to occur to get me there. And I think so much of my story and a lot of what I really speak to everywhere is this trust within self. And I think so often in the self-development world, we talk to our therapist, a guru, a professor, our mentor, or a parent, asking somebody else for their wisdom. And yet the holiest relationship of all is when we can source from self. So once you deepen that intimate relationship with self over time, you end up becoming clear on what the aligned action needs to be, and it paves the path. So that's the overarching theme. After undergrad, I worked in Chicago and I opened up a protein bar restaurants. It's a quick service, quinoa, healthy food restaurant in Chicago, DC, and Denver. And it was a marketing job. And I got them on Instagram in 2013, which was a big deal. And the greatest perk about working in the health food industry is all my meals were paid for. So I was 22. I ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the restaurant group. So when I got ready to leave my job and start traveling, I had this nice little savings. So that was definitely a big part of the story.
Before we really jump into your incredible journey during those years, which continues, I want to go back to what you said about really knowing and going back to what you always thought about when you were a child, and that we all have that within us. One question I have, and because you've now studied so many different modalities and ideas in terms of spirituality, do you feel like when we're children, we almost have this idea, because we're closer to when we came in, that we know our path, we know somewhat what we're here to do, and then so we remember it then, and that's what's in our mind? Or do you think that's past life stuff? What do you think? Do you have an opinion on that?
I have very strong opinions on all of this. For anyone who's called to past life regression, the reason it's so important is to remind yourself the thing that you likely desire most is something you've already done in a past life. So it just gives you the confidence. I personally don't think that's the most important information information to source from in this current human experience. There's a reason that you were born and reincarnated, and your soul is in this body, in this specific family, in this specific part of the world with a culture that prays to a specific God. That's a really important question to ask. And yes, we're all spiritual children. So Dr. Lisa Miller wrote the book, The Spiritual Child. It's a New York Times best-selling book. She's the head professor at my program at Columbia. So my background's in clinical psychology, and it's a spirituality mind-body institute, and it's all brought to the world by Dr. Lisa Miller. And a lot of what she hypothesizes is children are innately spiritual. They speak to animals. They can have compassion for people much older than them. They can see things a little bit more clearly, and they're curious, and they can ask these really big questions. And there's something to that because our culture doesn't nurture that. So there's a big conversation piece to have there. So I do think that there is this innate awakening that occurs for kids. I know for myself, a lot of that happened when I was 17, and I had my first really big awakening when I was on a teen tour in Israel and laying in the desert. And yet we live in a culture that doesn't necessarily support that inner wisdom. And in The Spiritual Child, Dr. Lisa Miller talks about how the healthiest thing for a child is to grow up with spirituality, whether that's organized religion or whether it's more spiritual practice, meditation, yogic philosophy, connecting to the earth, honoring the elements or the rise and fall of the sun or moon. As long as you have that connection, you are less likely to be depressed and anxious or abuse drugs. And there's really interesting research on it. So I think it's intuitive.
And what was your first awakening?
I went on a teen tour. I begged my parents to put me on this teen tour when it was Shorashim, which is a Chicago organization. They had this amazing trip. It was a week in Poland and a month in Israel. I ended up leading that trip 3 times after undergrad. It was a big part of my journey. But when I was 17, I was laying in the desert and I was looking up at the sky, and I feel like I got it. We are small little specks of dust on this rotating ball of earth, and whatever you desire is possible. And if the stars can shine bright, then so can I. And you can relax into that. And that's even how I start my book. It's so powerful, but I forgot. I became a sorority girl. I worked in a very organized setting. And then it really takes a lot of gusto and trust within self, to come back to God.
And what made you do that?
Oh, that sinking feeling in my heart, that waking up in the morning. And I'll never forget, I was 22, living in Wrigleyville. I had 2 roommates, still some of my closest girlfriends. We had mice in our apartment, and I woke up from a bad first date. Like, I went on another first date, and I woke up in the morning slightly hungover, and I just had that coming to God moment where you recognize you're out of alignment. And I think we have this all the time. And then we have a cup of coffee and feel better. And then we talk to somebody and we feel better. But what happens if you don't do the thing that's going to shift you and you actually take the action? So at the same time, I was still leading these trips to Europe and Israel. So I was always exposed to being on the other side of the world. And then in January 2015, I was asked to lead a trip to Israel. I stayed for 6 months, lived off the land, did a lot of really wild things, spent a lot of time alone, which was something that I was 23 and I spent a significant amount of time alone. I've never done that before my whole life. And then I moved to India and I worked in the slums of Mumbai with an Israeli NGO. And then I lived in many different ashrams and spiritual centers, studied with a lot of false gurus, spent a significant amount of time in silence. Don't think it's of highest good for women on the journey of connecting to God and self. And then I came back home for a bit and went to New York to start my master's degree. But the most amazing thing about my program was we only had to be there in the summer in New York City. So I would spend the year in Bali. I'd go back to Tel Aviv, and I would always lead these trips to Israel. So I'd use Tel Aviv as my home base and then go all over from there.
So just going back to, you were 22 and again, I think Karen and I actually very much can relate having some of those hits when we're younger, but not acting on it. I think most people listening, and I really hope they're listening, because it doesn't matter your age, you can always act on this. And I think to get that at that younger age, you will live probably even a much more fulfilled life rather than staying in what you think you need to do. So you had that thought when you woke up, you're hungover. What happened from that to get you to Israel? Because you were leading those trips and then you were just like, I'm not going back. Is that how that happened and you stayed?
Miracles occur when you get tired of your own bullshit, and we can always fill the void. And it's so easy. We can watch Netflix. We can scroll on our phone. We can date somebody new. We can create drama in our lives. We can gossip with a girlfriend. There's so much we can add into our lives that can continuously distract us. And it's not always bad. And I always want to preface that, because we thought our life would look one way and then we fall into another direction. And it likely had to occur on some level because you have to learn something. And we learn through pathways of suffering, peace, joy, pleasure. Like, it can be so many different avenues. And if you are somebody listening to this and you typically learn something through suffering, I urge you to just be open to learning something through joy and bliss. And the greatest thing for me, and this is the greatest privilege of all, is I could always come back home. So I moved back into my parents' house. I think
you allowed yourself. I just like, that's the other part. It's shedding ego too, in that sense. I know I learned that myself when I had one of my bigger awakenings was in my early 30s. It was having to let go. What do I really want? Am I really chasing the title and the money, or do I want a more fulfilling life? I think it's really important that people hear that. You were like, I'm going to go live at home when your friends may not have been.
Robin, I think there's a much bigger conversation here about women wanting more. And I've been talking about this nonstop, I feel like, with my clients and my community. Somewhere along the way in our white supremacy patriarchal system, which you have to honor, like, you just have to know it exists. And we're in America. I say that with like, there has to just be awareness of how the world kind of works in 2023. There is something to be said about women wanting more. And maybe feminism isn't cutting it for them, because we're not swimming naked underneath the moon or dancing and singing with our sisters or circled around a bonfire and burning our fears and co-breastfeeding our kids and having these profound conversations. And there's an awakening happening right now where women are deciding that this more, they didn't find it in their multiple 6-7-figure job. They didn't find it when they were climbing that corporate ladder, or when they were launching and scaling their business, or when they're burnt out, because somewhere along the way, the most nourishing thing was baking bread and raising the kids and cleaning the pots and pans. I think there's something really important to be said there. And then this feeling of moreness, because we judge ourselves. Everything's good. It's like, I have a full fridge. I have this sexy husband. It's so amazing. I'm so grateful. And I want to go eat in Italy so much. And I want to lay on the beach in Bali and hear Hindu Sanskrit chanting behind me. And I want to laugh so hard that I pee a little bit. We want these things so deeply, and we labeled it different. Maybe we call it self-care and it's a bath, which is so good and so healing. And maybe we called it feminism and we launch and scale the business and it's so good. And I think there's a really big conversation to be had around giving women permission to go for the more. There's a starvation for it. And that's what's happening right now. That's a lot of what I felt. I judged myself so deeply. And I was just 22, 23. But I was at this event last night, and I even said this to a girlfriend. I was always going to be this. And I know I've said to both of you, it's the Jewish Oprah. It's the talking about conversations of the soul, nourishment of the soul. And what's that pathway? And mine was Israel, India, Italy, Bali, really like different pathways through plane tickets and sitting with self.
You have this unique perspective, especially in the States, because I don't think many people have spent that amount of time in these different places. And what I love that you have brought back here is this idea of Eastern ritual meets Western psychology. So I'm sure when you were going through those experiences, you weren't thinking like, that's what I'm going to do, because you were just in it. You were just experiencing it. And you were seeing, just to even what you were just talking about, how women are treated in these different societies. And your brain is working like rapid fire all the time. So I'm sure you started to put those pieces together to a degree. What was it like starting to learn about how these different cultures to what you grew up in, and how you put that together in order to help others and bringing that back here?
Robin, I know you and I come from the same place. And I think this is, so maybe you've seen this also. So one question I asked was, why does every woman in my life have an eating disorder? Why does every woman in my life have a disordered relationship to food? And then I go study in the slums of Mumbai, and that's not a thing. If anything, having that bottom heavy, thick base was a sign of wealth, and it was attractive and it was healthy. And I started asking those types of questions. And then there's something to be said about it. I was just reading about this the other day. There's this article trending about how people in Italy don't necessarily have therapists. So my biggest teacher was anxiety. I had really bad anxiety. I didn't think it was unique at the time. I think everyone had anxiety. With that, I went to an American university. You drink a lot, you're eating cafeteria food, you're anxious, you have a test. There's a lot of different social dynamics. And that just wasn't true in Florence, Italy. It was just the students there I perceived them to be more quote unquote adjusted. So I started drawing these comparisons, and I think there's something to be said about our culture. And the reason I bring this up, and there's a lot that we can talk about when it comes to the mental health conversation in America, but I found meditation, and I found something that I would call, and it's a hard practice, slow living. And it's the art of enjoying your life. So it's something easy to see in Europe, especially in Italy. There's something else in Israel. Israel's the Middle East. So sitting down and having a coffee at 10 a.m., at 2 p.m., at 6 p.m., and coming together as a community is the norm. Turning your phone off and gathering as a community for Shabbat from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday is the norm. So you have this time in your schedule to shift, to align, to adjust. And even India is my first 2 months I was living in Baikala, which is a Muslim community near Colaba. The reason you may know Colaba, it's where the Taj Mahal Hotel is. And there was a terrorist attack over there. So sometimes people know about that area. And Baikala, tons of slums. I was staying in an apartment over there. And then after that, I was living in Andheri West, which is more Bollywood, the Bollywood scene in Mumbai. And you would have these LA, Santa Monica rooftop bars, beautiful energy and lights up high in Mumbai, like they would be elevated. And then underneath is slum after slum, just in every direction. And it's the ability to hold both. And that's actually a very Buddhist practice. So it's the liminal path. It's being able to hold both. And one of the greatest spiritual practices of all time is to never lose your compassion. So even as like you're seeing this both existing at the same time, it's knowing that you can walk the middle path. And that's one of my more sacred practices. But then you travel and you take what resonates. I mean, living in Bali, it's the norm to go to yoga twice a day and to connect to God multiple times a day and to chant Japti, which is a morning Sanskrit chant. And it's more relaxed. Your nervous system is regulated. And I think it's safe to say if you live in a city anywhere, you likely have a dysregulated nervous system.
Wow. And I'm just thinking from other people, it sounds so surreal, all of it. I keep thinking, Erin, you're the eat, pray, love only young. I'm trying to compare my work day to what happens over there. How do they balance that? How do they live in that kind of an environment and actually get things? It just feels like I love everything that you're saying. And I think there's so much truth to it. And I think that we have lost our way in terms of the balance. I think all of us know that at this point, but not knowing how to really get back to that. That is not our norm. That is not the world that we're living in now. So I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes, standing there and embrace that environment of what is it like to live over there. It doesn't feel like that could actually exist. And yet we all know it does. So how is that balance created?
Oh, it's so interesting because how I could perceive it may be different than somebody else. Like I could stand on this side of the street and somebody could stand opposite of me and I could say, it's the number 6, it's the number 6, it's the number 6. And the other person will say, Erin, are you crazy? It's the number 9, it's the number 9. The slums of Mumbai where pigs are running wild and free. There's chickens, there's flies everywhere. There's litter and plastic. There's children having their morning bowel movement right in front of you. And they're smiling. They're laughing. They have a satellite TV and they're watching Friends, the show Friends. There's certain phrases that you can say. They know the months in English. We would sometimes communicate by the train stops. I would take the train for an hour to get from Baikala to, I was working in Kalwa. It's a very specific slum in Mumbai where the Israeli NGO I was working with, which is called Gabriel Project Mumbai. why for anyone listening. And this, I think, is the most important thing is they're happy. They're happy. And we look at our Western lifestyle and we perceive it in such a different way, but that's what they know and they're at peace.
I think too, both from your time in Israel, in India, in Italy, and talking about this idea of slow living on an individual basis, do you think there's less fear or they're
more present maybe?
It's just part of the culture. So when coffee is part of the culture in the Middle East, you're connecting with your coworkers 4 to 5 times a day to have a coffee and a cigarette. And it's slow. When Europe is the greatest example of all time, of course, they're trying to adapt to us, but we're American. We work all the time. We're consistently on the clock, and it is essential to start practicing slow living. I think it's absolutely mandatory. It's not worth it. Your salary, your job, it's not worth your mental breakdown. And I think people need to hear that sometimes. We got it all wrong. It's you're working your ass off to pay for your lifestyle and it's making you sad. And I think people forget that. We wanted to walk on the beach. We wanted to eat with gusto and we're ordering in every single night because we're so empty. And when I say empty, I mean we're dysregulated. We're so exhausted. I remember as a kid, I'm 31 now. I'll be 32 at the end of May. I remember looking at adults and wondering, why are they so stressed? But now I get it. Now that I've lived my life and have moved through a lot of pretty extreme trauma, I get it. I understand. These tools must exist. Having a meditation practice is absolutely mandatory. It is not optional anymore. Drinking your morning hot beverage. All of us have a morning hot beverage, whether it's coffee or tea. Drinking that in silence by yourself or with a loved one. It is absolutely mandatory. You have to slow your life down. There is nothing more important than sleep. So waking up extra early to get your workout in, it's not of highest good unless you got in a decent amount of sleep. And then if you're going to work really hard for a job, you have to use that abundance to live a healthful life. So I really think things are changing though. I feel like there's big awakenings happening.
And just even hearing what you just said, personally, COVID was I know it was a reset for everyone, but even what you're talking about with daily routine, there was something that COVID allowed, I know in my home, sleep, changing my morning ritual, which I love having coffee in the morning, whether it's by myself or it's with my husband. That is something now I do every day, which I wasn't doing. And just having that reset and sleeping, it is life-changing.
Can we bring you back to the States now? And talk about all of that immersion into all of those experiences really grounded you and then brought you to Colombia, right?
So January 2015, moved to Israel. October 2015, moved to India. End of March 2016, came home to the States, went back to sweet home Chicago, which I love. I love Chicago with all my heart. And shifted to New York City for the summer immersion and then was still leading. So there's this incredible organization called Birthright. It's if you are 1/8 Jewish, which was the same rule for Hitler. So if you are 1/8 Jewish, you were Jewish enough to die in the Holocaust, then you're Jewish enough to get a free trip to Israel. And I was leading all their spiritual niche Birthright trips. So I was traveling aggressively. And then I launched my business the moment I got home from India. So I was teaching a lot of one-on-one meditation, a lot of group meditation, started my studies at Columbia, immediately started taking on clients. And for anyone that's listening, and I don't believe the feeling state of ready is real. I think that exists like in the far off future after 10 hours of sleep in a clean house. It's not real. So you start when the pressure is potent, when you're in the pressure cooker already. And I built a huge business because people were looking for different routes to heal. So I worked with a lot of women, with a lot of people with eating disorders, anxiety, depression, compulsive negative thought patterns. I created a very signature active meditation sequence, started teaching that. And then I got very organized. I would lead trips to Israel, use Tel Aviv as my home base. I would go to Prague on a gig. I would teach in Bali. I was teaching in meditation in Amman, Jordan. I would travel around, stay in Israel for a significant amount of time as well. And then I would always come home home and live back in my parents' house. And I think there's something to be said about, I built so much of my business in my childhood bedroom. And there's something so sweet about that. My master's degree was about 2 years long. I ended up becoming the head research assistant on this peace project, which was like the coolest thing ever. And I started my certification program, which is now the Aligned Coaching Certification, a school year-long program. I call it an Ivy League level certification because I really bring in a lot of these practices that I learned in positive psychology, science of happiness, emotional intelligence into the coaching space. The Aligned Coaching Certification is where you become a certified meditation teacher and spiritual psychology coach. And once I created that, it really became a big signature offering. I was leading retreats to Costa Rica, India, Israel, Tulum. I was traveling aggressively. And then I met my husband, who was my boyfriend. And then I got a proper home back in the city, back in Chicago. And then again, COVID also had which was a big awakening for a lot of people. But for us, it gave us the ability to start traveling again. So we spent the first year of COVID in California, Arizona, Costa Rica, Oregon. And then we just got back from a couple months in Bali and Africa. And we were back in Israel and Italy and Spain. We love to travel. I think there's so much you've learned. The truth is I love to eat. So I really like to eat. I eat with a lot of gusto. I'm really fun to eat with. I care a lot about mealtime, what I'm wearing, how I'm sitting, the vibe, and the food. So that's really why we travel. We like to eat.
I love that.
And meeting your husband, you use a lot of your manifestation techniques. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think it's really, and I'll share with you in the show notes a free masterclass I have about the most sacred manifestation practices. I teach a very specific practice called snapshot manifestation, and it is absolutely life-altering. It's how I manifested my husband. It's how I manifested my book deal. And I think so much of, thank God, my life today. Snapshot manifestation is sitting in the feeling of already having all you desire, but you're at a specific event. So I'll guide it for 1 to 2 minutes. Snapshot manifestation is when you get grounded in your body, you're calm in your body, and then you picture an event 6 months to a year and a half from right now. And it's an event that's going to occur no matter what. So it's not a hypothetical when my mom comes to visit me. It's my cousin's wedding on May 22nd. Like, it's a very clear date. The wedding is going to exist whether I'm there or not. And at this event, you have everything you most desire and you focus on feeling states. So if you are calling in your highest romantic partner, what does it feel like to watch the first dance of your cousin with your beloved's arm draped behind your chair? If you are manifesting a child, what does it feel like to place your hand on your stomach and feel a swollen belly? If you are manifesting a book deal or business endeavors, what does it feel like to quickly check the time on your phone and see an exciting text message that your agent sent you about a publisher that wants to talk? The amazing thing about snapshot manifestation is you can manifest multiple things at once. You just have to be clear on the feeling state. Feeling states are unique to you. They don't need to make sense to anybody else. They're usually metaphors. So a lot of what I call in is the feeling state of sitting in a new city in a coffee shop, drinking a cup of coffee with my journal, my husband, and we're just talking about the day ahead. And it feels so fun. We're just going to explore and eat and venture around all day. And there's no word in English for that. Maybe curiosity, maybe love of learning, maybe gusto for life. So just pay attention to those themes. Stay in your snapshot manifestation for about 10 minutes or so. You could do more if it feels good. And then when you come back, picture golden braided roots at the base of your tailbone, moving through the floor into the ground, connecting to the earth's core. You have to come back into your body. You're a physical human being for a reason instead of a floating spirit. And your daily practice is to sit in the feeling of your snapshot manifestation for 60 seconds every single day, no matter what, until you shift it. It works. It's like I've had so many people in my life say, holy shit, Erin, this works. I know it works. So yeah, try it. It's a good one.
Yeah. And it's free, everybody. That is free. We can do that. Thank you for sharing that. I know that we've practiced elements of that, but not exactly that way. So I'm excited to try it that way.
It's a more active version of a vision board for people who are familiar with vision boards. A lot of us create those at the beginning of the year, but I think it's the feeling of being in that, making it as real and tangible with sights and smells, just to really get in there and feel it actively, that I think is the key. Wouldn't you say, Erin?
Yes. And the key is the daily practice, because the most important thing is once you're practicing snapshot manifestation, you're going to see where you need to course correct.
Yes.
So and that's the most profound thing of all. If in your vision, your skin is clear and you have toned arms, then you're probably going to reflect on your day to day and be like, I'm eating like shit and I never go to yoga. So you're probably going to start scheduling that in. If in your snapshot manifestation, you're with your highest beloved, and in your day to day reality, you're in a relationship you don't feel seen in, or you're not even dating, something needs to shift. So that's why it's also profound, because it offers course correction. The most important thing is, I teach the practice called the Law of Massive Aligned Action. It's on my YouTube talk show with Erin, but it's really like the most important thing is knowing the feeling states. And the reason that's so important is because then you'll know you're an energetic match for the thing, the person, the decision, the event. It helps with decision fatigue, and it shows you how you need to show up day in and day out.
What is the connection between manifestation and activation? Because you use those words a lot. And just for people who might be like wrestling with the definitions of those and how to utilize them in their day to day, how would you define them?
Manifestation is shooting your shot. So it's calling it in. Manifestation is, this is what my heart desires. It's not a designer bag. It's station is, this is my highest self. And when I get the thing that I most desire, it is actually of highest good for everybody around me. So you feeling healthy in your body, you being with your highest beloved, you having a thriving business, you traveling the world, it's actually of highest good for all those around you. And I think when people are struggling with the more that we talked about earlier, the wanting the more, we think that it's so selfish, or we feel guilty for feeling it, when actually it's of highest good for everybody around you, for you to pursue your deepest desires and dreams. Activation is expanders. So activation is going out of your way to live in an inspired state. It's not going to just happen. You have to get yourself to the yoga class if that's something that resonates with people. I know for me, it's, I have to wake up. I teach mornings with meaning. It's an 18-minute practice where you connect to yourself, you connect to a higher power as you understand it, and it's an active meditation sequence. But if you are going to show up for your highest possible timeline, your greatest, and that's really what my book is about, you have to get yourself into that inspired state. So you have to do what you need to be activated. So that's why your morning routines are so sacred.
And I think even when you're talking about that snapshot meditation, it's about getting very clear about, and yes, you can know what you desire, but get clear about what that looks and feels like. Because to your point, once you do that, other things will shift and it becomes an awakener for what you need to change in order to get in that alignment with that energy frequency.
Yeah. And to really move you from that aspirational aspect.
Exactly. Yes.
Someone else with the vision board. So, I really want that new car and I really want to live in that neighborhood. Or I want that job, but you don't, it just seems so, it's like a reach for you. It's out of reach. It's something that you don't have. It's a lack versus putting yourself in the experience and really feeling that you have it already.
And that's what I always say is using Eastern ritual and Western psychology to do the thing that you've always wanted to do. And that's different for every single person. It's not a one size fits all model. There's no meditation practice. There's no diet. There's no sacred relationship that's going to be of highest good for all of us. And really taking that time to double your devotion, connect to self, decide what do you actually want out of this current human experience? What do you desire? Why do you desire it? And what is the aligned action needed to self-realize your dreams?
And you really have done the work in terms of seeing what is out there outside of this country and bringing it back, then marry it with science, with these other practices from a Western perspective and with with these Eastern rituals. I'm so grateful that you are one of the people bringing that to all of us, because I feel like that is how we will all evolve and live our potential.
That means a lot to me because I don't pretend to be, and all my clients will know this. If anybody asks me a question, I first say, what do you think? What do you think? You've sat with this for a little bit before you even brought it to me. So what do you think? And that's not common. So the continuous practice of sourcing from self.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you about that, the connection to your spiritual intelligence program that you run. And can you talk a little bit about that? And because it's a little bit different than anything I've really ever heard of before. And why now more than ever, this kind of accreditation process is really important.
Yeah. So spiritual intelligence is my business. I'm best known for the Aligned Coaching certification, where you become a certified meditation teacher and spiritual psychology coach. It's a master's level, Ivy League level certification. I partner with UPeace, which is United Nations School, because I have clients all around the world. I really wanted them to be accredited through the highest institution I could dream up, because everybody knows the UN. And it's a 4-term program. It starts with a meditation teacher training. I will literally not work with anybody unless they have a meditation practice. It is too essential at this point. You're just going to come into my space dysregulated. And once you have your breath, once you're connected to your body, you're going to ask different questions. You're going to digest the material in a different way. You're going to move throughout your life in a different way. So the first term is the meditation teacher training. The second term is the spiritual psychology immersion. So using the Eastern chakra system and marrying it to Western psychology. So chakra 1, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Chakra 2, talking about Fitzgerald and why it's so important to feel your feelings. Chakra 3, Jungian archetypes. Chakra 4, love languages. Chakra 5, like it goes on and on. And term 3 is our signature aligned coaching framework. So I took my classes at Columbia and I put them into the coaching space. So how do you use positive psychology is understood by this PERMA model, or exercising your strengths. What does that look like in a coaching session? And then term 4 is the business and clinical immersion. So I would say the people in ACC are those who want to be held on a year-long spiritual program. They just want to meet other women like them. And it's the best. I have clients in that program in their mid-20s and in their mid-70s. It's the most amazing, inspiring container ever. And I have women in the program that want to launch and scale a big business, because I love helping spiritual people generate abundance. So that's the Aligned Coaching certification for those who want to be held in a spiritual program and become certified and start a business. And for those who are already coaches, mentors, midwives of the soul, and they want to add new techniques and tools to their offerings. I also have a lot of business coaching programs just because I love working. It's really energetic. Like, yes, you want to create your product suite. Yes, you want to sell with soul and show up on social media in a way that feels organic because it's a free app on your phone. And also, it's what's the belief system behind it. So what is the signature offer? What's the medicine only you can share? What's the highest thing on your heart that's going to create massive impact, that's going to feel so good for you? Because I think, and especially women, we're seeing that the most reliable job that you can have is the one that you create for yourself. And then you can have it all. You can have the babies. You can have the flexible job. You can travel whenever you want. You can employ the people you desire. So I really love the business coaching. And then I have soul immersion and up-level meditation, which are online courses that are really popular. I think so many of my clients have moved through that. And I used to do a lot of retreats, a lot of corporate wellness. That's still something that we're playing with. And then I do my live event Nourish, which is a half-day workshop, and that's going to likely go on tour when the book comes out as well, which is like April, May 2024.
So talk about the book that's coming out. I think that's a really good way to start wrapping this up.
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's essentially done. I'm in that editing phase where I'm just being a little nitpicky about certain things. Not perfect. I'm not a perfectionist, but just really putting that soul into it. It is all about connecting to your inner guru, so your innermost authentic self, trusting that most authentic version of you, activating that soul authentic life, so that most authentic version of self, and living on your highest possible timeline. And I do share a lot of personal stories about living in Israel, India, Bali, all across the world, Italy, and the actual ritual, the actual ceremony, the actual psychological tools. So Eastern ritual, Western psychology, to really do the thing that you've always wanted to do and to live on your highest possible timeline. They call it prescriptive nonfiction, but it's definitely a self-help book. It has a lot of journaling, a lot of meditation, a lot of practices in it, a lot of stories. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to serve a lot of people.
Erin, you've talked so much about meditation today. And I think for people who might be listening and going, who are trying to improve their practice, who might be struggling a little bit, are there any tips that you can give to people to really integrate that more fully into their day-to-day?
Yes. So I teach active meditation. I don't think maybe if like you're on your menstrual cycle or if you're feeling low energy, a silent seated practice may feel better. I think active meditation, when you open up your shoulders and you open up your hips and you get energy flowing, because so often energy just gets stuck in our system and you need to give it a pathway to flow, to move. And I recommend 18 minutes. That's the perfect amount of time. It's high, it's life force energy. It's like to life. It's the perfect amount of time to try something new. There's a lot of research behind specifically 18 minutes. And you just want to get your breath in your body first thing in the morning, and then you can shift throughout the day. If you need to split it up to 9 minutes and 9 minutes or 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, whatever you need to do to get in the practice, try to prioritize that. Go to my YouTube. I have so many free meditation practices. I also believe practice in bed. So right when your alarm goes off first thing in the morning, just connect to your breath, give yourself time to set the intention for the day and just arrive in your body after sleep or after a night of insomnia, and then go from there. I'll also share which meditation sequence is best for you quiz, so people can take that quiz and see what feels best for them.
Oh, excellent.
We have packed a lot in this time together, and I know that there's going to be more conversations to come. We have so much more to dive in and talk about, and there's some of your own personal stories that I know you're going to share in the book that I look forward to talking about as well, because I think that they're eye-opening for others who may be traveling or what you may get yourself into in the spiritual world too, which is what makes your accreditation and all of the work that you've done so important, so that the people that work with you to become teachers and experts are authentic.
And I think people are looking for that framework because they may be really interested in, like you said, having a business or making this their gift to the world and just don't know how to start and really want to do it from a place where they can be like a school that they can really be guided through it. So just having that resource for people, I think is going to be really helpful. Thank you so much, Erin.
Thanks for having me.
You have so much to share in terms of places to go from this conversation to what Erin has already produced and how to work with her. So we'll have all of those links within our show notes, but I also want to just say that you can find out more about working with Erin and her courses and certification programs at erinracheldoppelt.com. That's ErinRachelDoppelt.com.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you so much, Erin. We can't wait to talk again soon.